I raised him like my own, gave up my career, my youth, and every quiet dream I once held just so he could have his. I paid for his wedding, his business, everything he needed to build a future. And then one day he looked me in the eye and said, "You were just the babysitter." That was the moment I realized I had been written out of a life I built from scratch. It was a Thursday morning in early spring when the phone rang, the kind of soft, slow morning where the sunlight spills through the kitchen window just right, and you can almost believe that life is kind. I had just finished baking a fresh loaf of sourdough, something I picked up after retirement to keep my hands busy. The smell of bread and rosemary filled the air. I wiped my hands on the apron and picked up the phone, not knowing that the voice on the other end would slice through me sharper than any knife in my kitchen. "Hey, Aunt Lena," he said. "Darren, my boy. Well, not biologically mine, he was my nephew, but I'd raised him since he was 4 years old, after my sister Talia died in that car accident. I was the one who dried his tears, helped him with algebra, taught him to shave, held his hand at every parent-teacher meeting. His voice still made something inside me ache and swell all at once. He was getting married soon, and I'd been helping with everything. The venue, the caterer, even his fiancée's custom veil, all paid for from the savings I'd never once used for myself. So when he called, I expected something sweet. Maybe a thank you, maybe a guess what we decided for the seating chart. Something small but warm. Instead, his tone was tight, too polite. "Careful, Jade and I were talking," he began. I could hear the sound of traffic behind him. He was out and about, his life moving forward, while mine still revolved around the ghost of the past I never escaped. And we've been thinking about the wedding, the guest list, the roles, everything. I sat down, the warm bread still steaming beside me. "We appreciate everything you've done," he continued. That phrase, "we appreciate," landing in my ear like a cold handshake. "But we were wondering if maybe it's better if you didn't sit with the family at the ceremony." I blinked. "I don't understand." He hesitated. Then, with a sort of exhale, said the words I would never forget. "You've always been amazing, like really helpful, but you were more like a babysitter, right? I mean, you were just filling in." My mouth went dry. The words didn't land all at once. They came in waves, crashing, receding, crashing again. A babysitter. That's what I was to him. Not his mother, not the woman who gave up her career, her dating life, her own future so he could have one. Just a stand-in, a warm body with a lunchbox, and a set of house keys. He kept talking, something about optics and family dynamics and trying to keep things simple. But I couldn't hear any of it. I was frozen, stuck in the space between what I had believed and what I now knew. The bread on the counter had gone cold, and so had I. Before I continue, I want to ask all of you to please give a like to this video and subscribe to my channel, The Silent Stories, for more stories like mine. Your support means the world to me. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment telling me which country you're tuning in from. It's incredible to see how far this community of wonderful people has grown, and I'm so grateful to be able to share my story with you. People often say you don't know what you're capable of until you're forced to step up. I never thought I'd be raising a child at 36. I had just moved into a tiny apartment in Milwaukee, started a new job at the city library, and had plans for a quiet, uncomplicated life. But life doesn't always care about your plans. When my sister Talia died, everything changed in a single moment. One careless driver, one wet road, one phone call that flipped my world upside down. And just like that, Darren, a wide-eyed 4-year-old with hair like hers and a tremble in his lip, became mine. There was no big decision to be made, no court battles, no questions. I showed up at the hospital the next morning, signed the papers, and brought him home. He had a little suitcase with a stuffed bear and a half-packed lunchbox. He didn't cry. That scared me more than anything. Those first few weeks were a haze. He'd wake up screaming some nights, other nights he wouldn't sleep at all. I didn't know how to calm him, but I stayed. I learned. I read every parenting book I could get my hands on, called pediatricians after hours, joined a grief support group for guardians. I traded nights out for school lunches, gave up vacations for new shoes, turned down dates for dentist appointments. It was never even a choice. It was just what love looked like. Darren wasn't a project, he was my purpose. He called me Auntie Mama for the first few years, then just Mom when we were alone. In public, it was always Lena. I never pushed, I never needed the title. The love was enough. At least I thought it was. He grew up in my home, celebrated birthdays with the paper banners I hand painted, learned to ride a bike in the cracked alleyway behind our duplex, scraped his knees and always came running to me. I was there through chicken pox, heartbreaks, and college rejections. I clapped the loudest at his high school graduation and drove him across state lines to settle into his dorm with a trunk full of Target dorm essentials. He got a scholarship, but it wasn't enough. So I picked up night shifts at the library's archiving department. I clipped coupons, skipped meals, and made it work, just like I always had. I didn't keep count. I didn't think I needed to. But now in hindsight, maybe I should have. Maybe I should have written it all down, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every time I said yes when I wanted to say I'm tired. Not because I wanted recognition, but because maybe, just maybe, it would have reminded him I was never just filling in. I was building a life for someone who didn't remember I built it. People look at older women like me and see someone who probably spent her life baking casseroles or clipping coupons, and they're not entirely wrong. I did both. But what they don't see is the quiet math of sacrifice, the ledger I kept in my head, the careful calculations behind every dollar I spent. Darren never knew how many times I sat in my car with the heater off in winter just to save on the gas bill. He never saw the credit card statements or the balance transfers. He only saw the new cleats for soccer, the winter coats that still had the tags on, the birthday cakes with his favorite figurines. I paid for everything, not just the groceries and the school trips. I paid for his future. I paid for his belief that life would work out for him. I wanted that for him, a soft landing, a world without the constant tug of we can't afford it. When he graduated college and said he wanted to start his own design firm, I didn't blink. I co-signed the loan. I cashed out the modest CD I'd been saving since before he was born. Money I once thought might buy me a little cabin near Lake Michigan in my retirement years. That dream slipped away quietly like steam from a kettle. I didn't mourn it. He was my dream now. A few years later, when he called to say he'd proposed to Jade, I cried tears of happiness at first. I'd always hoped he'd find someone kind, someone who would see the world in him like I did. And Jade, she was lovely, sweet, organized, a little obsessed with social media, but harmless enough. They wanted a vineyard wedding, something elegant, picturesque, timeless, Jade called it. I didn't ask how much it would cost. I just asked where to send the deposit. I covered the venue, the catering, the flower arrangements with imported eucalyptus, the string quartet for the ceremony, even Jade's dream wedding dress, a mermaid silhouette with hand-sewn pearl details. I wrote the checks, signed the contracts, and smiled through every decision. When Jade sent me the budget breakdown with the note, "Thanks so much, you're a lifesaver," I laughed to myself. No, I wasn't a lifesaver. I was the bank. And still I didn't mind. Truly, I wasn't looking for a front row seat. I just wanted to see him happy. That had always been enough. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing the shift. I wasn't copied on emails anymore. I was asked not to mention certain things to Jade's family, like the loan I took out to help them, or that the business Darren ran was still partially in my name. They wanted things clean, classy, curated. I was starting to feel like clutter, and yet I still paid, because that's what I'd always done, quietly, without condition, until that phone call, until the words "just the babysitter" carved themselves into my chest. That's when I realized love may not keep receipts, but maybe it should. I used to believe that love made you visible, that if you poured enough of yourself into someone, they would always see you. Not just look at you, but really see you for who you are, for what you've given, for the space you hold in their life. I believe that with my whole heart. But that belief cracked the moment Darren asked me to sit at the back. It was a week after the phone call. He came by the house, said he wanted to clear the air. I served coffee in the mismatched mugs we'd used since he was a kid, the ones with the cartoons that had faded over time but never broke. He barely touched his cup. He pulled out a copy of the seating chart and laid it on my kitchen table, right on top of my sewing project. I looked at it, hopeful for a second, until I saw it. Table 19. The farthest one from the head table, past the photographers, past the lighting rig, almost near the vendor exit. Extended guests, the label read. I stared at the word. Extended. Is this a mistake? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shifted uncomfortably. It's just, we had to make a few layout changes. Jade's family's pretty big. We had to prioritize immediate family. You know how it is. No, Darren, I didn't know how it was. Because I was your immediate family. I was the only person who sat beside you the night your mother died. I was the one who bought you your first suit, taught you how to cook eggs, held you through your first heartbreak when you cried so hard you couldn't breathe. And yet, here I was, just another distant figure in the crowd. A table number. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded. I think he took that as agreement. Or maybe it was just easier to believe I was fine with it. He left soon after, said he was running late for a tux fitting. No hug, no second glance. I stood there in my kitchen for a long while after he left, staring at that piece of paper like it was some ancient scroll that had rewritten history. It didn't matter what I'd done, what I meant. I wasn't part of the picture anymore. I was background. I used to tell myself that it was okay not to be thanked, that love wasn't about recognition. But that afternoon, as I sat in the kitchen that had been his childhood home, surrounded by memories he now seemed to treat like clutter, I finally allowed myself to admit it. It hurts to be invisible to the person you gave your entire life to. And it hurts even more to realize you always were. They just never told you. Gratitude is a beautiful thing when it's real. When it's not, it feels like a receipt disguised as a thank you. And over time, I started to notice that what I had once mistaken for gratitude from Darren was really something else, guilt, carefully dressed up in polite phrases. He stopped calling me mom long before he proposed to Jade. It happened so gradually I barely noticed. First, it was Lena in front of friends, then it was my aunt who raised me. By the time we sat down with Jade's parents to talk about the wedding, I was simply introduced as family. Just family. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need the title. But deep down it mattered, not because I wanted to be praised, but because I had earned that space. I had earned it in the quiet hours when he was sick, and I sat by his bed whispering stories to calm his fever. I earned it in the sleepless nights working overtime so he could attend that art camp he begged to join. I earned it in every small, invisible act of love that mothers do without question. But Darren had rewritten our story. I wasn't part of the origin anymore. I was the footnote and the gratitude. It turned from warm embraces and text messages with love you into awkward side hugs and I'll let you know replies. The shift was small at first until it wasn't. I remember one afternoon when Jade called me flustered, needing help with floral arrangements. The original vendor had canceled, and she was on the verge of tears. I dropped everything, drove across town to meet with a florist I used to work with back when I volunteered at the community center. I negotiated the contract myself, paid the deposit on the spot, and even arranged for extra white lilacs, her favorite. Jade was effusive. You're amazing, Lena. Honestly, we couldn't do this without you. I smiled, but I knew better. She didn't ask how much it cost. Neither did Darren. The next day I got a card in the mail, a thank you note, pre-printed with a glittery gold font. We appreciate your support and generosity during this special time in our lives. A few words scribbled at the bottom in Darren's handwriting. You've always been there. Thanks for stepping in. Stepping in. It hit me then. He didn't see me as someone who built the foundation, just someone who filled in until real life resumed, like a substitute teacher, a backup plan, a well-meaning volunteer who had overstayed her welcome. What started as gratitude had turned into obligation, and then into silence. And I, the woman who once believed love was louder than blood, sat in my own house, wondering if I had imagined the connection we once had. Had I mistaken dependency for devotion? Was it all just convenience dressed up as affection? And most of all, had I been fooling myself this whole time? It arrived in a pale ivory envelope, the kind that usually carries invitations, not betrayal. At first, I thought maybe it was a formal thank you card or even foolishly an invitation for something special at the wedding, a moment where he might finally acknowledge me, honor me. But when I opened it, I knew immediately it wasn't a thank you, it was a form. Folded neatly inside was a document from a law office. Not personal, not handwritten, cold, precise, printed on expensive paper, heavy and impersonal. I unfolded it slowly, my eyes scanning the top line, request for financial clarification and future support arrangement. My heart slowed. I sat down at the table. The letter, in polite but firm legal language, requested I clarify the nature of all financial contributions made to the wedding and business venture, followed by a clause proposing that I formally designate any future gifts or contributions as non-obligatory and relinquish any legal or emotional claim over them. It was surreal. Beneath the lawyer's wording, I could hear Darren's voice. Or maybe not his voice, maybe his hesitation. His desire to avoid another phone call. Maybe Jade had written it. Maybe they wrote it together. Maybe it didn't matter. I'd been reduced to a liability, not family, not the woman who raised him. Just a possible legal problem to manage before their picture-perfect life began. There was no apology, no explanation, just signatures, just paperwork. I read it 3 times, each word duller and colder than the last. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I once fed him grilled cheese on rainy days, where we danced barefoot to old records, where he had wept into my shoulder after his college girlfriend broke his heart, and I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. Whatever bond I thought we had, it didn't exist anymore. Or maybe it never had. Maybe I loved hard enough for both of us, and he just learned how to receive. The illusion shattered, not with a scream or a fight, but with a letter in my hand, and a silence that no paper could explain. And in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood up, walked to my filing cabinet, pulled out my own stack of documents, bank receipts, proof of payments, every email, every invoice, and placed them on the table. Because if he wanted to turn this into a transaction, I was finally ready to treat it like one. I always thought of myself as gentle, quiet, someone who solved problems with a warm meal and a kind word. But there's a line, a moment in every person's life when silence starts to taste like surrender. That letter was my line. I called Monica, my lawyer, a woman I'd helped tutor years ago when she was still studying for the bar exam. I had baked her muffins during finals and lent her books from my personal shelves. Now it was her turn. When she picked up, I said only 5 words. I need to protect myself. She didn't ask why. She just said, I'll be over in the morning. We spent the next week sorting through the wreckage of my generosity. Monica was methodical, compassionate, and precise. She helped me draft a legal response, short, clear, and final. All gifts made to Mr. Darren Blake and Miss Jade Monroe were voluntary, non-refundable, and offered in good faith. The sender maintains no ongoing obligation, financial or otherwise, and declines to engage further on this matter. And then came the next part, something I hadn't expected to feel so heavy, revising my will. It had once been simple, everything to Darren. The house, the savings, the pension. I had built my entire financial plan around the idea that he would inherit not just my possessions, but my legacy. But now he was someone who had tried to reduce me to a line item, a benefactor without a face. So I changed it. I left the house to the local women's shelter. My library of first editions went to the high school where I used to volunteer. The savings account, the one that paid for his wedding, I split between 2 literacy nonprofits and a community food program. It felt like closing a door, slowly but firmly. I didn't tell him. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't about revenge. This wasn't a warning shot. This was me fighting for my peace, the kind I had sacrificed again and again to hold someone else's life together. It was the first time in years I made a decision that wasn't rooted in Darren's comfort. And it felt good. No rage, no grief, just a quiet reclaiming of my story. Because I wasn't the babysitter, I was the architect of a life he no longer wanted to acknowledge. And if he no longer saw me in it, I finally saw the truth. I didn't need to be. The weeks after I signed the final will were strangely quiet. Not the hollow kind of quiet that aches in your chest, but the kind that lets you breathe a little deeper. There were no more phone calls, no emails, not even a thank you or a final goodbye from Darren. For the first time in decades, my days were my own. Not built around someone else's needs, but shaped by something simpler, purer choice. I started walking again, long, slow strolls through the neighborhood just as the sun dipped low, casting that soft amber light across the sidewalk. I joined a pottery class at the community center, made friends with a woman named Ruth who always brought an extra thermos of coffee and didn't ask too many questions. I read, I painted, I donated boxes of old linens and knickknacks I no longer felt the need to preserve for family. Because I had finally accepted something no one tells you when you give your life to someone else, sometimes the family you build in your heart doesn't stay, and that's not your fault. One morning I found an envelope at the door. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Darren's. Inside was a single page. No legal jargon. No manipulation. Just a line in his shaky scrawl. I'm sorry for what I said. I hope one day you can forgive me. I sat with the letter for a long time, folded it once, then again, and then I put it in a drawer with the old seating chart, the tuxedo receipt, and a single photo of him as a child, the one where he's wearing my oversized gardening hat and grinning with a popsicle-stained mouth. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to anymore. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means sealing it shut with love, not spite, and walking forward without bitterness weighing you down. Darren had made his choices. And so had I. I didn't carry regret with me anymore. Just lessons. And peace. I still sit on my porch most evenings, a cup of mint tea in hand, watching the world turn quietly. Sometimes neighbors wave. Ruth stops by now and then with something sweet from her kitchen. There's no drama. No mess. Just life. And it's beautiful in its simplicity. I paid for everything. His future, his wedding, his comfort. But in the end I bought something else for myself. Freedom.